The competitive edge, if you will, though, is continuously testing, trying, failing, and finding out what didn't fail and replicating. It is a repetitious scale, right? And the people that aren't afraid to try new things and then look at the data to see if it improved or not, you're just taking advantage of the system a little bit more, the system of the internet.
That was Thomas Basilovac, and this is episode number 129 of the Chopped Podcast. Hey everyone, I am Marley of the blog Namely Marley. I am your host, and this is the Chopped Podcast. You know, this is the place designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. Every week, my goal is to share interviews, thoughts, stories, everything related to food blogging so we could all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Today's guest is Thomas Basilovac. He is with the site Mashmetrics, and he's here talking about Google Analytics. Does that make you feel a little bit nervous or frustrated or overwhelmed? I know that sometimes I have that reaction to things that I don't know very well, and Google Analytics is one of those things. Thomas actually gives the number to about 90% of us. So if that makes you feel better, it certainly makes me feel better because I love a good spreadsheet. I love data. I have an MBA, so we spend a lot of time looking at and creating spreadsheets. So I totally love data. However, sometimes Google Analytics feels a little overwhelming and a lot like I don't know what some of these numbers mean. And I'm just overwhelmed with the fact that I know that I'm not using it to its fullest potential. And so that drives me crazy. And so I think sometimes it's just like easier to avoid it and not have to deal with it. I don't know. Do you ever feel that way? Anyway, Thomas is here to talk about exactly that. How can food bloggers use Google Analytics in a way that is best for food bloggers? Because interestingly enough, he compares Google Analytics to WordPress. When you pull it straight out of the box, it's not necessarily ready for you to use. Like you add plugins and different things to make your WordPress experience just right, just exactly the way you want it. Well, there are some things like that you can do to Google Analytics to make it work really well for you as a food blogger. That was such a relief to hear that, that just because we have some trouble kind of figuring some of these things out straight out of the box or just as you go to the page, it makes sense because, there's a few things that are a little different for food bloggers. For example, he talks specifically about that bounce rate. A lot of times we feel inferior. You keep hearing other podcasts or experts talk about the bounce rate and how it should be maybe more around the 60% number. And a lot of times as food bloggers, our bounce rate is a little bit higher than that. In fact, it's not uncommon to hear people talk about the 70s and the 80% range for a bounce rate. And if that ends up making you feel stressed because you think that number's got to get lower, Thomas is here to tell you something a little bit different. And I love this. So we talk about bounce rates for sure. We also talk about time on page metrics, unique visitors. We talk about viewability and the impact that will have on ad revenue. But most importantly, we talk about experimenting and finding ways that creates the best user experience for your audience. Because according to Thomas, that is the key. If you find ways to get your users engaged, you've struck what we call food blogger gold. That's good stuff there. So we got to do more of that. So lots of exciting stuff today. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. I know that after I listened to Thomas, I was just, I just felt like I heard choirs singing, I think. I don't know, but it was fun to know that, I can go back to loving data and food blogging. So I'm really looking forward to looking at Google Analytics with fresh eyes and to sharing that with you as well. So lots of exciting, fun stuff today. So what do you say? Let's get straight to it. Here's today's feature interview with Thomas Basilovac. Hey everyone, I'm happy to have Thomas Basilovac. He is of the site Mashmetrics. He's on the show today. Hey Thomas, welcome to the Chopped Podcast.
Hello Marley, happy to be here.
I'm so glad to be talking with you. I mean, I am really excited about today's topic because we're going to be talking about Google Analytics. And if anybody, don't hit stop right now, just give it some patience because this is going to be an interesting conversation. You're going to love it. We're going to make technology sound like fun, right, Thomas?
Absolutely. I am a theater and film major after all.
Oh my God. I still just can't get over that you're a theater and film major and you're doing Google Analytics, but life is a journey.
It takes all types, right?
That's right. And let's talk about that. I think it might be really helpful for everybody if they got a little bit of a background on you and how it ended up that you are now doing Google Analytics and working with Mashmetrics.
Absolutely. So the short answer is absolute luck. But being at, I'm not a millennial. Several decades ago, I was going to college, and like I said, I was a theater and film major. And one of the things that was really just a nuance is looking up 15-minute male monologues. And 20 years ago, you didn't have a nice computer to go up to type that in. You had card catalogs that you would spend time looking through. You'd go get your book, you'd look through them, trying to find where a guy would talk for a couple pages long, and then, move amongst your day. My roommate introduced me to Gopher and Fetch. And I'd be very interested to know how many on this phone call are familiar with those terms. But that was really the precursor to your Google and your Yahoo. And he's like, type it into these things. And I did, and it saved me about 4 hours at the card catalog. About that same time, I discovered what the average salary and employment rate was for a theater and film major and an actor, and made the decision in 1995 to follow the internet. And luckily, it wasn't a fad. So here we are today.
Wow. And then I'm sure there's been a lot of meandering. And Mashmetrics is your company, is that right?
That is my company, yes. I have a co-founder, David Fishman, and we now have 6 employees. So,
yeah, and I just want to clarify for everybody, you started out in Kansas City, so we're like pals.
That college was the University of Kansas, Marley.
Yes, and I went to the University of Missouri, so we're like competitors. Not anymore.
But yes, was born and raised in Kansas City and left in 2001. So...
yeah, and that's when the boom really started. And Kansas City is so cool now.
And aren't you happy I left?
More cool for us. I know, I'm kidding. Yeah. Anyway, so I before we get started on all the Google Analytics, I just have to ask you this really important question. Do you consider yourself a foodie?
I do the cooking in my household. I can never do what you guys do. I only follow your directions. I am the sheep, and you guys are my shepherd. So, but yeah, I can definitely appreciate a cordon bleu chef.
Yes,
for sure.
Good, I like it. So let's just get into it because I think Google Analytics. Everybody talks about managing by the numbers, and I feel like this is an area where a lot of food bloggers struggle. And when I say a lot, I put myself in that category as well. I love data. I love a great spreadsheet. But sometimes when I get on Google Analytics, I just feel like my head's going to explode. I don't even know what to look for. So I just would love to hear a little bit about your experience working with food bloggers and maybe some areas where you've noticed a commonality where people get things wrong.
Absolutely. Frustration is probably the number one problem that I see with Google Analytics. It's very daunting. You are actually in probably the rare percentage that is excited to see a table of numbers.
Yeah.
And the main issue with Google Analytics, or at least kind of out of the box, is it does a very good job of telling you 100 different ways of how many people came to your website.
Yes.
Whether that's 100,000 people, whether that's 5,000 people, and then where they came from is kind of like the second tier of what it tells you, and then what pages. Yeah. And if you're a small business, such as and you're a plumber or you're selling a service online or a product, then of course people need to go to a couple pages in order to really buy your product or see your brand or your service. But as content marketers or as content websites such as food blogs or yoga blogs, etc., your product is that one page. And right into Google Analytics, it's just telling you how many. And your question to Google Analytics is probably, how do I improve? Or what does this mean? And those answers aren't really so readily available. That's where people kind of get frustrated, is it's not answering the true question that you have.
Well, I think that's such a great point to clarify because I feel like there is a lot of training out there on how to use Google Analytics, but it does oftentimes feel like it's catered towards, like a brick and mortar business or, just things that maybe not so specifically towards what we're doing.
Definitely. And, that's really the kind of gap that I saw in the marketplace. I've been doing, Google Analytics and web analytics for years and years. And when Casey Marquis actually introduced me to this space, I saw an amazing gap and such a fundamental shift in any of the articles that people will read. For instance, I can only imagine being a food blogger and looking at some of the blog material about bounce rate. And if you're not at 60%, then you're doing things massively wrong. Your average bounce rate is going to be 80%.
Yeah.
And if it's lower than that, I've seen as low as, and I just talked to her and she told me I could mention her name, but Boulder Locavore, 73% bounce rate. And that's not adjusted. That's the real deal. That is a dream case and that is something to work towards and a goal. But your averages are going to be 80%. And so all those articles about, businesses and things like that, they're not written to the food bloggers and certainly not e-commerce, right? Everything else is written about e-commerce. So.
That's right. Exactly.
So here I am.
Here you are. We're going to solve everybody's problems.
Well, how about half of them?
Yeah, at least some of them, right? But I think that's a really good point to clarify because so we all go onto Google Analytics and then we start comparing ourselves to maybe some of these metrics we've heard. And a really good one that you just pointed out is bounce rate. And we keep hearing people say, you need to have a low bounce rate, 60% or so. And here we are in the 80s feeling like a failure. And I think what you're saying is that doesn't make us a failure.
Absolutely. There's a lot more that people are doing on your webpage.
You hear that big collective sigh. We're all like, oh, thank you for saying that, Thomas.
Absolutely. And you know what? Your time on site is probably completely wrong as well. Let me kind of go into a little bit more detail, if you don't mind about that. Please. So first, here's the problem. The problem is years and years and years ago when kind of Google Analytics was created, then you would almost always go to more than one page view. The web was created all around pages. And so that's exactly what Google Analytics tracks.
Right.
So but it also tracks that way as far as from page to page. So if I land on your website and go to page A, that's great. And then not until I go to page B is it able to see how long I'm on that page. Now, I could also spend another 17 minutes on page B and then leave your website. Doesn't count any of that because it doesn't have a time stop in order to find out, when did they get here and when did they leave.
Interesting.
So when you can imagine your bounce rate, somebody comes to your website, they don't go to another page. That's real. About 80% of the people on your website don't go to another page, and I'll explain that in a bit. But if I don't have a second page, then none of that time is being counted by Google Analytics, at least not out of the box. And, I don't really have any other valuable metrics because everything is page-based. All I know is that 22,000 people came to this page from Pinterest.
Interesting.
And 85% of them didn't go to another page.
So are you saying that when let's say somebody comes to the site, they're on page A, and they don't go to page B, they just only go on to A and then they leave, and maybe they spent 10 minutes, that Google Analytics is probably not going to count that full 10 minutes?
No, probably about it. It's not. Unless you have on-page click encounters or things like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
So then let's take another scenario. You have a user that comes in on page A, they spend 10 minutes, and then they click to page B. Now Google Analytics has something to measure it by and say, okay, we know they just spent 10 minutes on page A. But
Correct.
If they spend 10 minutes on page B and then they leave, the total time they spend on the page was 20, but Google Analytics is not going to report that. It's going to say 10.
10 minutes
Wow.
is that average time session.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
I don't like that.
And again, that's a bit of a problem for businesses and services.
Yeah.
A massive problem for bloggers.
Right.
And if you also take a look at our consumer, and honestly, I'm going to play the consumer in this part because I am.
Okay.
I go to a food blog when And it's always fun because I'm now recognizing most of the names too when I go
Yes.
look for a recipe. But I've got company coming over this weekend and I need to do my grocery shopping. Before I do my grocery shopping, I need to find out what I'm going to make. So I'm going to do my initial research and look at several different recipes. I'm not in the mood to find out your particular brand, and I'm speaking to you, the food blogger.
Yeah.
I'm in the mood to try to find broccoli, cauliflower, chicken pot pie, we'll just say.
Okay.
Brain fart on a good recipe.
Yes.
With mashed potatoes and green beans, etc.
Yeah.
Right? So now I'm going to do my searches, and I'm going to have probably 5 different tabs open. Or if I'm on the go, I'm going to go to a website, go back, go to the website, go back.
Yes.
I might love that article, and I'm going to save that article, or I'm going to print it, right? Or I might email it to myself and share it. But I'm not in the mood to say, I wonder how much, what else does Sally have on her blog?
Yes.
That's not my mindset.
Right.
And especially if I'm coming in from Pinterest, which all I have is a picture of you. I don't even know who you are, what
Yes.
you've done, if you're a healthy website or anything. I'm coming in and then, probably going to leave very quickly.
Right.
And where we've applied scrollability, so how far people are scrolling down a page and then how long they're spending on a page, Pinterest still has a pretty low amount of people that are spending a great amount of time.
Yeah.
But that bounce rate goes from 80% down to 50%, 30%, because people are interested in what you have to do. Just not all of your pages yet. But that's why it's important to collect their email address and have that return visitor traffic. But that's a whole other topic.
I know there's so much that we could talk about, but I also know that you've worked with several food bloggers. I mean, several as in a lot of food bloggers now. I'm curious if you have, some key strategies that you try to apply to food bloggers.
Yeah. So your jump to recipe buttons,
Okay.
your print to page buttons, all of those things, users love those. Therefore, Google loves those. Your advertisers will not like those.
Yeah.
I will say that front and foremost. And before we get off the call, I definitely want to have the conversation about where advertising's going on this. But anything you can do to really allow the user a choice. And there's 2 layouts that I see out there. People that are bloggers that put their pictures kind of at the top and then the recipe down below. The ones that have the teaser ingredients at the top, then some pictures and then recipes and, different layouts there.
Yeah.
That is great. And that's the uniqueness and the creativity. And there's no data that's going to, data will tell you whether it's a better or worse, but it's your creativity that's going to dictate most of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the great thing about data is you can see how you're performing better or not. But every single one of the people that use the jump to recipes or things like that gives that user an option. So they might want to scroll down the pictures, or they're in a hurry and they just want to jump to the recipe. You've now given them a choice.
Yeah.
So instead of clicking the back button, I'll click on the jump to recipe. And now I'm engaged in your content. And just like a game, kind of gets you in when you easily do level 1 and then level 2 is a little bit harder and it continues to get a little bit more difficult. Users are the same way. And if they press that button, now they're in your recipe. And if you engage them from there, then they go down. And that's how you sell your product. And your product is getting people to read your entire recipe.
Yeah.
That's my one tip and trick, I guess.
I like that because, it meets the user where they're at. Like I would think a more experienced home cook would love that jump to recipe because I don't want to see 10 different pictures of, that you are so in love with that brownie that you want to put 10 pictures. I mean, there are so many amazing food photographers, so I totally get it. It's really hard to choose the photos sometimes, but sometimes the user doesn't want to see all those photos. Sometimes they do. Sometimes, especially
Sometimes they do.
a beginner or somebody that maybe hasn't tried this kind of recipe before, they want to see all those photos. So it's kind of nice. It just caters the user experience.
Yep. And that's what Google wants too, right?
Yeah.
You can, there's a lot of things you can do to improve your SEO. 75% of them probably have to do with things that also affect the user. All of that page speed and, how usable your website is, your bounce rate. And by the way, the Google bounce rate is much different than the Google Analytics bounce rate. they're looking for people that are going to a website, clicking right back all of a sudden. Food bloggers, it's a little bit different. So I want to kind of demyth that as well, that Google doesn't see your 80% bounce rate. Unless you call yourself a food blogger, but you're selling a lot of insurance on your website, then you probably have a problem. Yeah. But yeah.
So what do you mean by that? Like, in other words, Google might hesitate to recommend on the first page a blogger that has a high bounce rate, but you're saying that's not the case for food bloggers?
It is the case.
Okay.
It is the case, but their bounce rate is a bit different.
I see.
Because they are looking for people that are going to submitting a search.
Yeah. Going
off to your website. It doesn't have anything to do with that search, and so they're going right back to Google.
I see.
Right. That's a bad bounce. Now, most likely, and again, we measure this by using time on site and things like scroll tracking. If people are coming to your website and they're spending a fair amount of time, 30 seconds even, not even 45 seconds, and then going back to Google, that's not so bad.
Okay.
That gives Google enough kind of leeway to say, all right, if it took them that long to be upset, they're just picky.
Yes.
Right? So
right.
It's not obviously wrong. That we're going to find out in the first 10 seconds.
Yes.
You probably have a high bounce rate in Pinterest, but luckily Pinterest doesn't necessarily drive you down on that. So
okay. Wow, it's a lot to keep track of.
Yes.
So when you're working with a food blogger, you're going to be putting, am I hearing this right? You're going to be putting something on their site, or you're setting the Google Analytics up in a way that helps them better measure their results?
That is correct. We look at it as, there's really three things to get out of Google Analytics. First, to make sure the data is accurate. And, that isn't so much of a problem, but, I caution if you have several Google Analytics plugins, take a look at it. If your bounce rate is 5%, you probably are doing things wrong.
Yeah.
So there's that part. And, we, of course, make sure that none of that is going on. But what we kind of talked about earlier, why people are so frustrated when they come into Google Analytics, is it doesn't speak your language.
Yes.
So what we do is make it a bit more actionable by applying, time on page, adjusted bounce rate, scroll tracking, offsite clicks, etc., and then apply different goals so that now you can see how you're actually performing, how the rest of the users see you, not just Google Analytics. And because people don't always want to go in and look at an Excel spreadsheet or those rows of data, right? We also have accessibility options. So we have some nice visual dashboards. We have performance alerts. So if your bounce rate goes way down or your organic traffic disappears, we send you an alert. And then we also have realized that URLs are also not necessarily the language of food bloggers. The categories you use, whether it's an appetizer or a main dish or et cetera, that you might want to actually see your traffic by that. So we unleash a lot of that kind of metadata as well so that you can report on that. So those are kind of the three things that we work on.
You talk about actionability. Is that what you said?
to make the data actionable. Yes. Still playing with words there.
I know. Alliteration is important. So, but to make it actionable, I imagine means that people have to be able to understand it. So I think that's what I'm hearing you say is that you have like out of the Google Analytics out of the box is probably not the way we need to be using it. We have to fine tune it to make it understandable.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you just do.
Yes.
It's much like WordPress. You can install WordPress, you can download it, you can write a couple posts, you can probably even change your theme once or twice. Yeah. But if you really want to take advantage of stuff, if you want great SEO, you need to have the Yoast plugin, right? If welcome to the internet where it takes several different skills.
Right. So nobody needs to be beating themselves up right now if they've been using Google Analytics right out of the box and feeling frustrated. I think this is it's just, as far as I'm concerned, this is new information about how to use Google Analytics.
90% of the people that I talk to have not set up goals, have really not really done anything differently than installing the script. And shame on Google Analytics,
Yes.
honestly, for not promoting those features more.
Right.
I guarantee if there was AdWords on those explanation pages, they'd do a better job of it.
Yes. Well, and honestly, it seems like it would, I don't know, behoove them to do that, because then people we're their users, right? They should want to explain that to us better.
And I've thought about this. I've gone to the conferences.
Yeah.
It's also a matter of, there's 400 million websites that have Google Analytics installed.
400 million. Okay.
400 million. And that's a large audience to talk to.
Yeah.
And to really, what's really allowed me to have a lot of fun, and I think, allowed our solution to be where it is because I'm working primarily with food bloggers right now. And so I'm able to cater the solution towards that.
Yes.
Your local restaurant, they're probably not going to care about the scroll rate as much. Their pages are hopefully, you don't scroll too much. You're going from page to page. And if you're not going to page, there's probably a problem there anyway. So it's there's different solutions for them.
Yeah.
So Google does have a big challenge of how do we make this easy for everybody?
Yeah.
And it's probably going to take them a while to do that.
Well, it's wonderful for you, right? Because it's given you this opportunity to step in and say, okay, food bloggers, here's how we do this.
It's given me an opportunity to step away from corporate America and say, hello, food bloggers. I'm here to help out. Yes.
Yes. So I'm imagining most food bloggers know how to, they like you say, they've got it loaded. They know how to go into Google Analytics and look at their page views. They know how to, figure out probably what country people are coming from. Most of us, I think, know how to go into our traffic and figure out referrals, like, I'm getting a majority of my traffic from Pinterest or Google or Facebook or whatever. I think that's probably a given for most food bloggers. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what it really comes down to is, I think what I'm hearing you say is Google Analytics is a tool that has a lot of information that we could use to really help us understand our traffic better in a way that maybe we can create more content that fits that, or, take advantage of some of the things, like you say. Okay, let me just say it this way. Goals. You talk about goals. What would be the point of me setting up a goal in Google Analytics?
Great point. So every website has a goal, right?
Yeah.
That's easy to say for an e-commerce site. It's easy to say for a business site because they have leads. But a content site does too. You want to collect email addresses, for one.
Yep.
So that's a goal. You want people to go to more than one page. So that's, another goal. And those are ones that you can easily kind of, set up yourself. Now, that's where you find the difference between just the quantity of people coming to your website and the quality of that traffic. Because, any kind of personal coach, one of the first things that they're going to tell you is establish what your hourly rate is and value your time, right? So if my time is worth $50 an hour, then I want to make sure that everything that I do is kind of moving towards, some sort of value.
Right.
Therefore, if I'm spending a lot of time concentrating on making sure that Pinterest is always got my recipe number one, and I'm spending a lot of time towards that, but then I find out that, that audience for the most part is bouncing. They're not spending a lot of time on their website. They're certainly not, filling in my email addresses. Maybe I can spend that time on organic search and looking at some of my past articles and, trying to repurpose those. And that might, and looking at that traffic, maybe it's not as much traffic, but it's long term, it's long tail, if you will, and the quality of that traffic's going to be better. So looking at analytics for the answer is very, very tough and somewhat frustrating. Making some changes and asking it a question, that's a lot different. So, when you ask yourself questions like that, so where should I kind of spend my time, writing to, that's, kind of a more effective way, I should say, about going into Google Analytics. Or maybe I want to, I'm okay with my traffic as it stands, but I want to easily double that by getting more value out of the people that signed up for my email newsletter. Okay, so you're going to go through the steps to, work with your email newsletter. In a couple weeks, that's when you want to go into Google Analytics and say, okay, my email traffic, make sure you tag it to make sure that it's coming from email. But my email traffic, are they coming back more? Are they going to more than one page? Because those are the people that you should be able to convert. So use data as kind of the facts behind it, not necessarily for the question book, if you will.
I want to ask you a question. I hope this isn't too far off topic either, but I have done this before, but I know that like if you did a Facebook ad, you can also put a tag from that ad on your site, right? And you can actually track how many people have come to your site from that ad.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Called retargeting.
Retargeting.
You're retargeting towards Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just another example. I think what I'm hearing you say is like there's all there's a lot of opportunity to use this as data to be a part of the decision-making process that you're doing as a food blogger. And a lot of us are not utilizing that.
Absolutely. It's fun to use it as vanity purposes.
Yeah.
Great. I'm getting 100,000, page views a month now, or, I'm getting 150, or wow, that pin's working. That post worked. But that doesn't get you a paycheck every 2 weeks from Mediavine.
Right.
And that's going to start getting harder and harder as, they start switching towards viewable impressions and things like that, where not even a page load's going to send you a paycheck. They're going to have to view that ad, which means they have to scroll down a certain amount, which means they have to be on your website for a certain amount of time. And when those switches start flipping, analytics is going to start being more and more part of that decision-making process. And, I sympathize with the food blogger because you guys are just writing great recipes. Yeah. And then we tell you really what's involved in having an internet media website, and it's fairly overwhelming. Yeah. So, I kind of use data as that checkpoint of, what should I be working on and when, and is that even going to work? And it can really make your job easier versus more complicated sometimes.
Well, and like Casey Marquis said on the podcast a few weeks ago, he said that this is a really competitive field. So it does, it's important for us to use every tool that we can to help kind of give us that edge, not to be competitive with others, but to, maybe with our own audience, just to reach our own audience the best that we can.
What I tell you, what I've really enjoyed working with food bloggers for is that competitiveness really isn't there. It is really a community.
It is, yeah.
And, you're not competing. You are, yeah. But luckily there's a lot of eyeballs out there, and the eyeballs are, you can buy more than one product. I can look at 15 recipes in a day, not just one, right? So that competitiveness really goes away, and the community has really, really brought itself up. The competitive edge, if you will, though, is continuously testing, trying, failing, and finding out what didn't fail and replicating. I probably said that fairly fast, but it is a repetitious scale, right? And the people that aren't afraid to try new things and then look at the data to see if it improved or not, those are the ones that are, not necessarily the better competitors, but you're just taking advantage of the system a little bit more, the system of the internet.
Now, does it take?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Does it take some time, though? I imagine that you can't try something new and then expect to go into a week later and see the data and see something majorly different. I mean, I imagine it takes some time.
Completely depends upon your traffic. Right. You want to get, enough success, enough traffic in there where you can make a pretty valid decision. There's the whole concept of scientific significance and statistical significance. Yeah. When you start trying new things, I want to offer another tool. I love the Google Suite, and Google Optimize is another great one that they've just released. It's a free A/B testing tool. Oh, cool. And what A/B testing allows you to do is say, here's my normal layout. I'm going to take off that header banner at the top, and I'm also going to make my print labels button a little bit bigger here. Let's see if that is improving things at all. Whether that be the scrollability, time on page, bounce rate, etc. Let that run, and it will tell you if you've got enough traffic or not.
So you're saying different users would have a different experience on the site?
50% of your users would have the same experience. 50%
cool.
of the people would not. And then you can see which did better.
like those books that you would go, like you could go to Costco and there'd be like 10 copies of the same book and all would have a different cover on it.
Yep. And there's a and you know what? You don't see that happening at Walmart so much or your other retailers.
Yes.
Because they've used Costco as a testing mechanism, which does work better. And then we'll roll that out to everyone else.
Yes, exactly. Interesting. So, oh my God, that's just huge right there. You could, does the sidebar add value? Oh, there's just so many things that you could test that way.
Yep. And, if I were to kind of look at I have to say I'm a food blog newbie. I've worked with about 100 food blogs at this point, but for about 4 months. So I can't consider myself an expert, but I will kind of make a prediction of by the end of this year, I think there's going to be a fundamental shift as advertising starts to be more paid upon viewable impressions. Yeah. That's going to force food bloggers to think more from a marketing eye and a layout style and like user experience. And that's going to drive more creativity for one, because you get to try new things. Yes. But, as far as like testing different layouts and things, I think I realize that's a fairly new concept, I think, for a lot of food bloggers, but I think you're going to hear more and more about that.
Well, it's funny, just hearing you talk about that has caught my wheels turning. And I was thinking, I feel like a lot of us are so tuned in on the easy recipes because that's what some people are looking for easy recipes. And yet if the jump to recipe feature gets very popular, I could see the advantage of having a more complex recipe with some how-to images so that maybe they jump to the recipe and they see a process that requires, look above for for a photo on how to do this. And then they have to go back up through the content.
Don't be afraid to get users interacted, because at the end of the day, if someone's going to just come to your website, do a quick scroll and then leave, it's what they were going to do anyway.
Yes.
Where you're never going to have a competitive advantage. They're just not finding what they want, and there's not a problem with that. Yeah. But the more you can engage those people that are ready to be engaged, that's your competitive advantage, if you will.
Yeah, I could see, also you could talk about the health advantages of certain ingredients up in the content as well. And maybe, I guess the trick might be mentioning some of that in the recipe if you can. I guess maybe down in the notes section, you could say, hey, scroll up and look at, here are the omega-3s that are involved in pumpkin seeds or whatever.
So one of the reports within Google Analytics that's always kind of walked over, and you can find it underneath your audience breakdown, and then it'll be interests. And it lists all kinds of different affinity categories in market segments. The first couple, of course, are going to be food and health and things. But then underneath that, it's going to say movie lovers or news and weather or, all kinds of different interests.
Yeah.
We all have writer's block sometimes.
Yes.
And when your main job is to write recipes, it gets even harder.
Oh, yes.
But you can go to that report and say, hey, maybe if I talk about Angelina Jolie a little bit, at least I know that, 20% of my audience is also interested in movies as well.
Yes.
And then you start to engage that user ever so more. So
that's nice. And too, that's another way of bringing in your own personal life, because maybe you can talk about the most recent movie you went to or somehow draw that in.
Exactly. And instead of just hitting it, just hitting it wild, yes. From data that this is going to be personalized to X amount of your visitors. And yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you talk about these three things: accuracy. Is there, are there things that people might be doing? I don't know if wrong is the right word, but maybe they're not using it enough to get accurate data.
Sure.
Obviously, page bounce is one of those things, or the bounce rate.
Right. So, I can't say that the bounce rate at 80% is wrong, because that is what it is. People are not going to the second page. It's certainly just not necessarily the engagement metric people want to go to. But I'm not one, and there's, varied opinions on this, but I can't just say that it's wrong. When I talk about accuracy, I mainly talk about making sure that you're at the most updated version of Google Analytics, yes. Which is Universal Analytics. They made that switch back in 2012, depreciated the old version in 2014, but there's still many sites that are still utilizing that. Your reports are still populating, but not so much, not so well for mobile traffic. It's just not coded for that yet. The second thing is installing numerous plugins. So you install Monster Insights, and it puts the tag on the page, and then you might install Better Analytics, and then it installs the tag on the page, and now you got two tags going to the same one. Looks good from a page view standpoint. Looks good from a bounce rate standpoint because you've got about a 5% bounce rate, but that's all overstated or understated because that's incorrect.
Yeah.
The other one isn't so much an accuracy because it has got better and better, but it's more a confusion standpoint, and that's all the different spam filters out there. Or I'm sorry, all the spam traffic.
Yeah.
And everyone's seen the I love Vitaly or vote for Trump or shell.google or, you name it. They're never coming to your website. It's probably, depending, of course, how much traffic you get, but they're not sending more than 1,000 or 2,000 visits a month for the most part. But then you get into just confusing data. And as a layman, that would confuse the heck out of me seeing kind of some of that stuff. I don't know. Now I no longer trust my data because I don't know what's real or not real. So if you go into your view settings, there's a checkbox that says remove all bots and spiders. Highly recommend you do that. And sans, of course, our own service with a bunch of different filters. Let Google do its job, which it's going to this year, of making sure that that's not as bad as it has been this last year.
Okay.
But once you get that done, then you're pretty assured that you're looking at least trustworthy data. May not be actionable yet, but at least it is the trustworthy data that you can rely upon.
Oh, that's great. I heard somebody say recently that there's a discrepancy against page views and page sessions. Do you know what that means?
Yep. So a session, think of it as a user walking into a store. Okay. So you have Sally, and Sally walks into a store. Sally's a visitor. When she walks into the store, she's taking a visit, or she's had a session into the store.
Okay.
And she looks at 3 different t-shirts. We'll call those 3 different pages. Okay. So Sally is one visitor. That's one session, 3 different page views.
Okay.
Then she walks out, grabs her husband for the credit card, goes back into the store. That's the second session. Still one visitor, but a second session. And then she looks at 2 more pieces of clothing. That's 2 page views, and then she checks out.
Okay.
Right? So Sally is one visitor,
one unique,
2 sessions, 5 page views.
Okay. That's very helpful.
Now, you said something interesting, and you said page sessions, and that is somewhat similar. That just means that I'm not going to count you every time you look at the same t-shirt, just the first time.
Yes.
And then you can look at it 5 times after, and I'm just going to count you as one. That would be a unique or a page session.
Very, very good. I mean, even just knowing the terminology just feels so good,
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that takes you to the second point, which is actionable. It's hard to be actionable on things that you don't really know what you're looking at. I mean, for example, I think you said before, a lot of people will go, okay, where's my traffic coming from? It's coming from Pinterest. Okay, well, my actionable step is I want to get more traffic from Pinterest. But like you're saying, that may not necessarily be the best quality of traffic. I feel like that's an example of how we can oftentimes be so busy doing things, but are they the right things?
Yep. And man, again, I sympathize because there's so many things, I won't even begin the checklist because that's just going to scare me off. But, I'll tell you the reason why I kind of made the shift from just kind of the general internet work way back when and really specializing in data was kind of back when the bubble was bursting. I was working for a company and we were laying off a bunch of developers. And, it bothered me because they seemed to always lay off the developers that were working on the cool stuff that I was working on. And we didn't really have anything telling us the facts of, are people using the Zoom feature, or are people using the add to wish list feature, or all those things. But they were just making random decisions to just lay off developers. And that's when I kind of started to get into data, and I, forced them to put an old school, not even in business anymore, web tracking on the websites. So at least we could determine if you got to fire someone, fire the person that no one's looking at their technology, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That has stood true for, 15 some years now of if you use data, not so much to scare you off and not so much as a vanity, but just as a time-saving tool, it's great. And we all do it every day. We just don't do it in the context of Google Analytics. We look at the temperature and we figure out what to wear that day, or we step on the scale to figure out what to eat or not to eat. We make data-driven decisions all the time, but Google could certainly do a better job of presenting that data to us a little bit better so that we could do that for our business.
Yeah, I like about you talking about the weather because it reminds me of the Midwest. And since you're from here, you know this, that people in Missouri and Kansas are looking at the weather app probably all day long, whereas people, in Phoenix, where it's the same all the time, maybe not. But anyway, my point was...
I was going to say, I've deleted my weather app.
I bet you have, Mr. San Diego. Yes, I'm a little jealous of that because, we're like, you look at the hourly feature on the weather app.
I change my SPF factor per day. That's what I do.
Oh, I see. So you have to figure out how much,
how much sun we're going to get.
Yeah.
I digress.
Do I do 50 or do I do 80? What? Yeah. So I'm curious. I hear a lot of people that talk about using, I don't even know what the name of it is. It's like the live feature on Google Analytics so they know exactly how many people are on their site at that moment. Is that helpful information?
Real time?
Yeah, real time. Thank you.
Real time is helpful for two different reasons. The first reason, you just change something real quick, or you're doing some work on the website. You want to make sure that everything's still up and running and pumping okay. It's good to kind of check there, along with probably your web developer, hosting company, etc. But that way that things keep on ticking. Other than that, vanity. Oh, yay! There's people on my page right now.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, when you're first starting off, that's a massive, massive just motivation booster right there. Yep. To know, wow, someone is on my site right now, or 5 people are on my website right now.
Yeah.
And however, that's about as far as that wheel goes, because you're looking at such a small subset, people that are on your website right now, that it's hard to kind of make quick decisions upon it. And now, another way to use it is if you log into Google Analytics in the morning, or your WordPress, and you notice, wow, I've this article is going nuts. Go ahead and check in real time to see where are they coming from. Mm-hmm. You'll see the channels. So are they, is this Pinterest? Is this Facebook? Is this Twitter? Is this Yumly? Is this Huffington Post? Mm-hmm. And stop everything. And so yeah, you can find that information out really fast.
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think, because then you can, if you find out it's on Pinterest, you can go find out what that pin was and actually repin it to other areas too. Yeah. That's really helpful.
Yeah. But of course, looking back, the next day or whatnot is also going to help you in that as well. Of which. Wow, yeah. Saw a big spike, right. Looked like it came from that pin. Let me add a couple more tags, categories, because, it's working, which means it can work more.
Now, you've spoken about categories a couple of times now, so I want to ask you that question. Is that really more SEO, or are there some things that people can do to kind of track the categories on their site from Google Analytics?
I can't answer the question as far as SEO. That would certainly be a question for Casey. However, the way I utilize it is we now kind of bring that in as another data point in Google Analytics. So if within WordPress you have nice categories entered in there, or even tags and attributes, we can pull that in as another thing you can report on. So I can see how many visits I have for recipes around my main dishes versus my appetizers versus rice versus chicken, kind of things like that. So that's where I utilize those from an analytics standpoint, which is super valuable.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't like looking at URLs so much.
Right.
But I can't answer whether that makes a change on SEO.
So that's kind of that accessibility section then, where it's one thing to have the accurate data. It's important to have it actionable, but you also have to be able to understand it. And I think what I think I'm hearing you say is like you're able to create the data and put it in a way that's like okay, I know what to do with this now. I know exactly, a lot of people are coming to my site for rice recipes and I need to do more rice recipes.
Exactly. Out of the box, Google Analytics gives you access to the URL.
Yeah.
We've created a couple things that gives you access to the tags, the categories, the post date.
Yeah.
So now I can see, wow, those articles that I wrote, 3 months ago were a lot better. I need to get some sunshine or something, brighten my day up, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Or I want to duplicate what I was doing around that time, now. Just seeing it in all those new kind of different dimensions, is what we overlay on that.
I also imagine you can probably start to see some trends. Like, oftentimes food bloggers will lament the fact that they don't get, at least in the United States, not a lot of traffic in the summer. And I think if you see that as part of a trend, you can not freak out so much.
It's something to watch this summer for me.
Yeah.
Yes. but yeah, and the biggest thing about data is, again, and I can't stress this enough. I think this is time number 4, but it's not the answer. Yeah. It just shows you what's going on, but it's not going to tell you exactly how to succeed. That's just as important of looking at it kind of long term and understanding, okay, wow, my traffic went down this week. Well, do year over year traffic, and you might notice actually it's gone up compared to last summer.
Right.
Viewing everything in kind of time context is very, very important. How you performed against last week, against last month, and even not so much, that particular last week, but year over year, if you're, solid enough to have that amount of traffic. So, or that long of traffic.
And I think you said that you kind of set your blogs up so that they get these alerts. So if the traffic does go down by a certain amount, a certain percentage, they'll get an alert and they'll know that. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. It's using the custom alerts feature that everyone can use within Google Analytics. Okay. So.
Oh, I see. Everybody can do that, but for sure your clients are set up with that.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, there's really no secret sauce to what Mashmetrics does. Okay. What we've done is just put together the perfect solution to, solution to the problem of, Google Analytics is just not very cool out of the box, especially for your general layman.
I get that. So I tell people this all the time. There is so much to do as a food blogger, and we can't be masters of everything. So if there are, in other words, go figure it out if you want to do it all on your own. However, there are resources like you that we can pay to do this for us.
Well, kind of in my funding, when I knew I wanted to pivot and move away from, doing campaign segmentation analysis for large Procter & Gamble type companies forever, and sorry if that's a sponsor. There's a decision whether I wanted to train people on Google Analytics and how to set it up and how to have the perfect solution, or just find a price point where they just get that and then spend the time on learning how to utilize Google Analytics once it's set up. And again, that's where I found on the marketplace, you can go to a lot of places that are like how to set up a goal and how to do this and how to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. I don't want to learn how to write a recipe. I just want to follow you guys' leadership and just cook the recipe. So
you've got a recipe for us now on this one, right?
Yes, in fact, that's what they're called in Google Tag Manager, is recipes. So yes, I have a food blog recipe.
Okay, let's talk about ads for just a little bit here. You had mentioned, where ads are going, and that is viewability. Have we covered that enough, or do you think there's something else you'd like to say on that?
I don't think you can stress that enough. Okay. So right now, food bloggers are for the most part getting paid every time a ad is loaded. And that's going to load whether I see that on my browser or not. Procter & Gamble and a lot of the major advertisers out there have said, we're tired of paying for ads that are not being seen. And so the IAB, which is kind of the council above the advertising, has really started to shift towards what's called a viewable impression. A viewable impression is where 50% of the ad is actually shown to that user. Now, I would imagine it's not going to be a dramatic shift of, boom, you no longer get paid. There will be different tiers that I as an advertiser can buy into, whether I will just run, just general advertising, whether they're viewed or not viewed, but I'll pay a lot more if I only, purchase viewable impressions, etc. But as an ad revenue driven industry, that's, going to greatly, greatly, greatly influence food blogs.
Yes.
As I start looking at scrollability versus, the actual page views, we're talking set 25 to 75% difference in ad revenue. So we can't bring that up enough. It's along with Google Analytics, SEO, PPC, page optimization, and everything else that you need to learn about. Start really, put it on a Google alert for, viewable impressions, because it'll be a significant difference in the revenue base.
Now, how would you create a Google alert on viewable impressions?
And I mean, within Google Trends.
I
you
see.
can go to Google Trends or something and set up every time a new article. Yeah, we're not there yet on Google Analytics.
Yeah, okay, I got you. I mean, it's kind of a bummer about being a food blogger, right? Because the brand or the advertiser can see if their ads are getting impressions or not. Whereas, like, if they were advertising in a magazine, they know that maybe this magazine has 100,000 subscribers, but they don't know if their ad's being looked at. I mean, 9 times out of 10, people are probably just like flipping right past that page.
Yep. And it'll be interesting because when you make that shift, as you just mentioned, kind of comparing apples to apples becomes, a little bit more difficult to do when you're thinking of, it used to be, well, I can track the ads a lot better. So, there's a premium or a value to that versus a magazine or versus TV where I've got my Nielsen ratings, et cetera.
Yes.
But to actually prove that ad was on that page, it still doesn't mean that I looked at it.
Right.
And we do a pretty good job of, kind of blocking out ads. But that's a pretty bold statement as an advertiser.
Yeah.
And that's why, my prediction is there's going to be tiers, because I also, as an advertiser, I might not have $25 CPM, and I may not want 1,000 absolute viewables. I'm willing to take that branding chance that, they view by me real quick or something. That's a whole other session for you, Marley.
I know, it really is. I mean, I just feel like in some ways food bloggers are in a bit of a tricky spot right now because, we know from SEO perspective that Google really wants us to stick to the topic. Like it used to be that people would write all these stories and then go went to see grandma this weekend and then talk about the apple pie that we made. But now it seems like, according to SEO standards, Google's really wanting us to stick with the topic. This is an apple pie, and then to get viewability back in, it seems like you've got to have some kind of way to tie them back into the post. So I'm just saying it's a tricky spot we find ourselves in.
I think if you set your goal to please your users, you're gonna be in a good spot.
I agree.
Maybe not immediately with advertisers, but we all have a love-hate relationship with advertising.
So yeah.
But pay attention to your users. Do your users right. It's just like a business.
Okay.
If you have a great product but really bad service, you're not going to last very long.
Right.
If you have really good service and a mediocre product, you're going to learn probably before you actually go out of business because you care about the service.
Right. Okay, that's good. I think that's such a great, a thing to focus on, like you say, is just really paying attention to that user, their experience, and the value that you have to provide them. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the fun part.
That is. So, Thomas, I just think it would be really helpful for people if you could kind of talk about the ways that you work with bloggers. I mean, it sounds like they can, you can work with them one-on-one, or you have some consulting services. How is it that you work with bloggers?
Sure. A couple different tiers. For one, as I've kind of mentioned, we've built a recipe, if you will, for, the food blog solution for Google Analytics.
Yeah.
Taking care of all the minutia of making sure it's accurate, setting pre-configured goals to make it actionable, and then some really nice visual dashboards and, some other things like the categories, et cetera, to make it accessible to people. More than happy to work on a more consulting basis as well, and that'd just be more or less get in contact with me for a quote on that. But we're our match solutions are pretty cut and dry. We have a 149, a 249 package, depending upon where you lie in traffic, and we'll get you started. And by the time this publishes, we should also have a monthly model as well, where based upon all of the nice events and goals and the setup that we put in, now we're able to give you more customized reports. We're able to train upon that, like we discussed, instead of just training people on a general 60% bounce rate. I know you guys, and I'm able to talk about that a little bit more. And then we're also going to have open office hours and kind of things like that.
So you're saying the 149 and the 249, those are annual fees, but then you're going to be adding like a monthly maintenance kind of program?
Not even annual, actually. That's just a one-time getting you started, because all we're doing is applying settings to Google Analytics.
I got you. Okay.
But the monthly is going to be, your private Facebook, your one-on-one webinars, kind of things like that to help people out when they need it on a monthly basis.
I love it. So, this is great. So, I think this is such a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with everybody. Do you have any other, zingers you want to share, or can we move on to my fun questions I like to ask at the end of the interview? Did we cover it?
No more zingers. I think I've already covered enough.
You have covered a lot. I mean, we have gone through a lot. Okay, so let's go to my fun question. So, what I just like to ask everybody these fun questions. It's like a way of personalizing the interview. So, what's one food item you can't live without?
Oh, wow. Wine.
Okay. You're the first person to answer.
That counts, right? I cook with wine.
I've been asking this question for 2 years, and you're the first person to say wine. I love it. Red or white or all?
Red. Red.
You go for the healthy
stuff.
Now,
for cooking, for the most part, white, but red to drink.
Okay. And do you have a particular favorite? I mean, I always go back to, what was that movie, Sideways, or what was that movie where he was like, if they order what was that? Do you remember that movie?
I don't, but I will say you have a barefoot night.
What's that?
Some nights you're in for a barefoot, and some nights you're in for a good Oregon and raft. So
okay. Merlot, that was it. The movie was like, if they order a Merlot, I'm out of here. I'm gonna have to send you the link to that movie because you would really love it. It's like a whole movie about wine.
I will watch it.
Yes, it's very good. Okay, so what's the favorite app on your phone? And since you're a techie, I think this could be a really good answer. No pressure.
Can I answer anything other than the Google Analytics app?
Oh, they have that on the phone?
Yes. Oh. Wow, a tip and an answer.
Yes.
And I highly suggest downloading the Google Analytics app. It also gives you kind of like little
notifications
and things like that. They're really starting to put a lot more functionality into that.
Cool. So is that your favorite app, really?
My other one is Flipboard. What is I really like. Flipboard kind of curates the news and information around, and you can set your different topics, and it makes research a lot easier, or just kind of, your daily magazine reading.
Cool. That's nice. I like. Is that a free app, or do you have to pay for it?
It is free. It is free. I'm not big on games and stuff like that.
Yes.
So
I'm going to have to check that one out. Okay. You sound like such a busy guy. I can't even imagine that you can answer this question, but do you have any time for TV? And if you do, what's your favorite show?
Good question. So I have a bit of time that I make.
Oh, that's right. You're a theater guy. You got to have some time for drama.
And I just stopped rewatching with my girlfriend Breaking Bad. God, I forgot how good that was. I just forgot. I might even watch it back again. I don't know.
But it's brilliant the way they just 1 minute you're hating a character, the next minute you love them.
Well, I'm just going to use data on this, but it does seem to be that the channels that they can actually cuss on seem to have better ratings on their TV shows than the ones that you can't.
Interesting. So do you think I should start cussing on the podcast? Would that be better?
That's up to you, Marley. Boy, I had to watch myself on that.
I'm sure there's been a few foul words on this podcast from time to time. But, my problem is my mom listens to my podcast every now and then. So I just feel intimidated by that. I don't cuss in front of her.
And, after this, my mom might be listening there in Kansas City as well. So I'm going to...
We'll keep it good and clean.
Keep it good Christian Catholic clean.
But it is an interesting observation. I've had that myself as well. That seems like when people are more freewheeling with their language, that it seems like that popularity follows that.
Tony Robbins changed directions. He lost some of his audience, but he's also grown about fivefold from the moment he started.
Really?
As he calls it, using more engaging language.
I did not know. Honestly, I never even paid attention to that. So there was a point in time where he started saying, I'm releasing the hounds, and
yeah. He was pretty much kind of,
straight-laced.
Conservative.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to say straight-laced, but conservative, because, he had to be somewhat engaging. But that's a good way to put it. Opened up the floodgates, and it worked.
Wow. I do think there is something to, I love the topic of authenticity. And so somehow just like finding that sweet spot of being relaxed and just being yourself and being authentic, I do think it resonates with people.
And, maybe we close with this. As much talk, as much as we've talked about data and making data-driven decisions and kind of things like that, it goes back to, why Google is looking much more into backlinks and usability and things. And we've said before, do good by the user, right? And you know what? If you can pull that off, if you're a cusser and you want to, be that blog, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that's your authentic self.
Yes.
And if there's one thing that I've loved working with I'll say you guys, is just everyone is so authentic in doing this because they love it. You don't go to college to be a food blogger, and you certainly don't quit your job because I might as well just write a food blog. It's a lot of passion and authenticity, and keep that and you'll be fine.
I love that, because there is this tendency when you get into it to try to, she's doing this, so I should probably do that too. But I think the more you can just really listen to your own story and connect with your audience, the better. I think you're right.
Or ask me what their traffic is before you make that decision.
Oh, that sounds very good. Okay, speaking of that, Thomas, how can people find you online?
Mashmetrics.com. And I also open up, we have a free audit where I'll make sure that your data is accurate and give you some tips on the actionability and accessibility of it by going to mashmetrics.com/free audit.
And I noticed that on your site that you've got a place where you can just fill out an appointment and just do it right there.
By the time this releases, it'll probably be a webinar, which will be like once a week. But yes, there'll always be that personal thing. That's what we're all about.
Wonderful. Thomas, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me. I had a really good time.
Myself included, Marley. Thank you very much. Rock, chalk, Jayhawk.
You had to get that in, didn't you?
I did.
Mizzou.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Thanks to Thomas Basilovac for being my guest on today's episode of the Chopped Podcast. Be sure to go to choppedpodcast.com for more information about today's show, including links of the things that we talked about today. But you also want to sign up for our newsletter, because there are some really exciting things coming your way soon. And the people who are on that newsletter, they're going to be the ones to hear about it first. So be sure to head there and sign up for the Chopped newsletter. I am so pleased to have the Chopped Podcast as part of your entrepreneurial creative journey. Thanks for listening and for supporting the show. We love it when you can give a review on iTunes or Stitcher. You can also share about this podcast with your friends on social media. All of this makes a big difference, so please keep spreading the word. You inspire me, and I hope today's show was helpful and inspirational to you as well. Now, go forth and be your best you.